The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council stretched high above the assembly floor on Nexus Prime. 47 different alien species filled the curved seating areas, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes that would have amazed any human seeing it for the first time. But Ambassador Lisa Carter had seen this sight many times before, and today it filled her with the same quiet frustration it always did. She sat in the center of the human delegation area, flanked by Captain Ryan Mitchell and Dr. Susan Blake. Around them, the alien delegates chattered in dozens of languages, their translators converting the sounds into the standard galactic tongue. The noise was constant and overwhelming, but Lisa had learned to filter out most of it over her 5 years as Earth's chief representative to the galaxy. High Counselor Vexithera rose from her elevated platform. The Zephyrian's multiple legs clicked against the crystal floor as she moved, and her large compound eyes swept across the assembly. When her gaze fell on the human section, Lisa could see the familiar look of amused tolerance that she had come to despise. "Today we gathered to discuss trade routes and defense agreements," Vexithara announced, her melodic voice carrying easily through the chamber. "Several species have submitted requests for expanded commercial partnerships and mutual protection pacts." The Korthak delegate, a massive creature covered in thick gray hide, let out what passed for laughter among his people. It sounded like rocks grinding together. "Let me guess, High Counselor. The humans want more access to our shipping lanes again." A wave of chittering and humming filled the chamber as other aliens joined in the amusement. Lisa kept her face neutral, even as she felt Captain Mitchell tense beside her. She had warned him about this before their first council session. The mockery was part of the process. "Indeed," Vexithera continued, "Ambassador Carter has submitted a formal request for increased human participation in Rim World trade networks, as well as inclusion in the Galactic Defense Force patrol schedules." The Vorthan Elder, whose species was among the oldest in the galaxy, spoke in his ancient creaking voice. "How charming. The young species still believes their primitive vessels could contribute meaningfully to galactic security." Dr. Blake leaned forward slightly, her scientific mind unable to completely hide her irritation. She had spent decades developing new technologies, pushing human engineering to its limits, only to have their achievements dismissed as toys by beings who had mastered faster-than-light travel before humans had discovered agriculture. "Their weapon systems are particularly amusing," added the Nexari representative, her crystalline form reflecting light in prismatic patterns. "Chemical propulsion and kinetic projectiles. How delightfully archaic." The laughter grew louder. Some of the younger species, those who had only achieved galactic status within the last few centuries, seemed especially eager to join in mocking humanity. Lisa understood the psychology. It made them feel more established, more legitimate to look down on someone else. Captain Mitchell's jaw tightened as he listened to the aliens describe human military capabilities with barely concealed contempt. His own service record included 3 colonial defense actions and 2 deep space patrol missions. But none of that mattered here. To these beings, human soldiers were playing with firecrackers while they wielded the power of stars. "Perhaps," Vexithara said with exaggerated politeness, "we should hear Ambassador Carter's presentation before making our decision." Lisa stood slowly, gathering her dignity around her like armor. She had given this same presentation with minor variations at least a dozen times. The response was always the same, but Earth's government required her to keep trying. "Honorable delegates," she began, her voice steady and professional. "Humanity offers unique perspectives and capabilities to the galactic community. Our approach to problem solving, while different from established methods, has proven effective in numerous applications." The Trethan delegate, whose species resembled a cross between a spider and a flower, made a sound like wind chimes. It was their equivalent of polite skepticism. Different approaches, yes, but effectiveness requires results measurable by galactic standards. "Our manufacturing techniques," Lisa continued, "may seem basic, but they produce reliable, maintainable equipment. Our communication systems, though they use electromagnetic radiation instead of quantum entanglement, provide redundancy and security advantages." "Electromagnetic noise," corrected the Korthak delegate. Your species broadcasts its location to anyone with basic sensors. It's a wonder you survived long enough to achieve spaceflight. More laughter filled the chamber. Lisa pressed on, knowing that everything she said was being broadcast back to Earth, where billions of humans watched their representatives being treated like children at an adult gathering. Dr. Blake stood to support her ambassador. Our research into quantum mechanics and energy manipulation may be in early stages, but we've developed several innovative applications that could benefit all species. Innovation, the Vorthan elder mused. A polite word for reinventing solutions we perfected millennia ago. The session continued for another hour, with human proposals being systematically dismissed or redirected to study committees that would never meet. The aliens were not deliberately cruel, Lisa realized. They simply saw humanity the way adults might view a bright child playing with building blocks while the adults discussed architecture. As the formal session ended, delegates began filing out in their various ways. Some walked on legs, others floated. A few teleported directly to their transport platforms. The conversations that drifted back to the human section were in dozens of languages, but Lisa's translation implant caught enough fragments to understand the general tone. Persistent little creatures, someone was saying. Give them another century or two, came a reply. They might develop something useful. Captain Mitchell waited until most of the aliens had left before speaking. Ma'am, how do you stand it? Every time we come here, it's the same thing. Lisa gathered her presentation materials with practiced efficiency. Because, Captain, they're not entirely wrong. We are young. We are primitive by their standards. But being young and primitive isn't the same as being stupid or worthless. Dr. Blake nodded in agreement. Every species in this galaxy started somewhere. The Zephyrians weren't born with quantum manipulation abilities. The Korthak didn't emerge from their homeworld already understanding subspace physics. The difference, Lisa said, looking out through the crystal dome at the alien city beyond, is that they all followed similar development paths. Energy-based technology, quantum communications, antimatter propulsion. We're taking a different route, and that makes them uncomfortable. Ryan Mitchell looked skeptical. Different enough to matter? Lisa smiled for the first time that day. Captain, in my experience, the most important discoveries come from approaching old problems in new ways. Sooner or later, the galaxy is going to face a problem that can't be solved with energy weapons and quantum computers. She paused at the chamber exit, looking back at the empty seats where 47 species had just finished dismissing humanity's potential contributions. When that day comes, our primitive solutions might be exactly what everyone needs. As they walked through the corridors of the council building toward their transport, none of the three humans could have imagined how soon that day would arrive, or how dramatically it would change humanity's place in the galaxy. 3 weeks had passed since the humiliating council session, and Admiral Jack Harrison was reviewing routine patrol reports when the first emergency transmission reached his flagship. The UES Liberty hung in space near the Outer Rim territories, leading a small flotilla of human vessels on what the aliens considered a pointless exercise in showing the flag. Lieutenant Katie Ross burst into the Admiral's ready room without the usual protocol. Her face was pale, and her hands shook slightly as she carried the communication pad. Sir, we're receiving distress calls from the Kepler system. Multiple sources, all alien colonies. Harrison set down his coffee and took the pad. The transmission quality was poor, filled with static and interference that made translation difficult. But even through the electronic noise, the terror in the alien voices was unmistakable. This is Kepler 442b Colony Control, the message began, the translator struggling with the rapid Zephyrian dialect. We are under attack by unknown entities. Our defense grid has no effect. Repeat, energy weapons have no effect on the attackers, so. Transmission dissolved into screaming. Not the controlled panic of a military emergency, but the raw terror of beings facing something beyond their understanding. Harrison had heard similar sounds during his years of service, but never from Zephyrians. The logical composed species rarely showed emotion, let alone absolute fear. Commander Pete Johnson appeared in the doorway, his intelligence division badge catching the light. "Admiral, we're intercepting similar distress calls from 7 other systems. The pattern is spreading along the outer rim." Harrison activated his command console, displaying a holographic map of local space. Red indicators marked the locations of distress calls, creating a rough arc along the galaxy's edge. "How long between the first call and the last?" 18 hours, sir," Johnson replied. "Whatever's hitting these colonies is moving fast." The next transmission was even worse. A Korthak mining station managed to maintain contact for nearly 10 minutes before going silent, and their final messages painted a picture that defied conventional military understanding. The attackers seemed to absorb energy weapons, growing larger and more aggressive with each shot fired at them. Dr. Susan Blake arrived from the Liberty's science section, carrying a tablet full of preliminary analysis. "Admiral, I've been studying the signal patterns. The interference isn't random. Something is actively disrupting subspace communications in the affected areas." "Jamming?" Harrison asked. "Not exactly," Blake replied. "It's more like the signals are being absorbed or converted. The quantum entanglement channels that allow instant galactic communication are being severed." Katie Ross looked up from her communication station. "Sir, we're receiving a direct transmission from Galactic Command. The Zephyrian Defense Force is mobilizing to respond to the crisis." The message from High Counselor Vexathara was brief and carried the same condescending tone the humans had grown accustomed to. "Human vessels are advised to maintain safe distances from affected systems. This situation requires advanced military capabilities beyond your current technology level." Harrison felt his jaw clench but kept his voice level when he replied, "Galactic Command, this is Admiral Harrison. Human forces are prepared to assist in evacuation and rescue operations." "Negative, Admiral," came the reply. "Your vessels would only complicate our response. Maintain current patrol patterns and leave this matter to more capable forces." Commander Johnson shook his head in disgust. "Even facing an unknown threat, they still think we're useless." But as the hours passed, it became clear that the more capable forces were having no success. The Zephyrian battle fleets arrived at the affected systems only to find empty space where colonies had been. No debris, no survivors, nothing but the strange energy readings that made their instruments malfunction. Dr. Blake worked frantically to analyze the limited data they were receiving. "Admiral, whatever these entities are, they operate on principles we don't fully understand. They seem to feed on energy itself, which would explain why traditional weapons are ineffective." "Feeding on energy?" Harrison asked. "Think of it like this," Blake explained. "Most galactic military technology works by projecting or manipulating energy fields. Plasma weapons, quantum disruptors, antimatter charges. If these creatures can absorb or redirect that energy, then the more advanced the weapon, the less effective it becomes." The implications were staggering. The galaxy's most powerful military forces were essentially feeding their enemies with every shot they fired. The more they tried to fight, the stronger the attackers became. Lieutenant Ross interrupted their discussion. "Admiral, I'm receiving emergency broadcasts from the Nexari home system. The attackers have reached the inner colonies." The transmission from Nexari Prime was unlike anything in galactic communication records. The crystalline beings, normally precise and mathematical in their speech, were broadcasting pure panic across all frequencies. Their quantum communication network, the most advanced in the galaxy, had been completely severed. "They're everywhere," the broken transmission stammered, "moving through space like they own it. Our ships fire everything we have and they just grow larger. The sound they make when they feed is like reality tearing apart." Harrison stood at his command console, watching red indicators spread across the galactic map like an infection. 16 systems had gone silent in the past 24 hours. The Galactic Defense Force's most powerful fleets were retreating in confusion, their energy-based weapons proving worse than useless against an enemy that seemed to thrive on the galaxy's most advanced technology. "Sir," Commander Johnson said quietly, "we're receiving a new transmission from Galactic Command. They're requesting any information human forces might have gathered about the attackers." The tone had changed. The condescension was gone, replaced by something Harrison had never heard from alien communications before. uncertainty, and the first hints of desperation. Dr. Blake looked up from her analysis. "Admiral, I think I know why they're asking us. Our sensors work on different principles than theirs. We use electromagnetic radiation and radio waves for detection and communication. If these entities are focused on quantum and energy-based systems, they might not even notice our presence." Harrison nodded slowly, understanding the implications. "We've been shadowing the affected areas for hours, and nothing has bothered us. Because, to them, we're probably invisible," Blake continued. "Our technology is so primitive by galactic standards that it doesn't register as a threat or a food source." The Admiral activated his fleet-wide communication system using the old-fashioned radio transmissions that the aliens considered crude and inefficient. "All human vessels, this is Admiral Harrison. We may be the only force in the galaxy capable of gathering intelligence on this threat. Prepare for reconnaissance missions to affected systems." As the Liberty and her escort ships moved deeper into the crisis zone, their crews had no idea they were about to become humanity's introduction to galactic warfare. The species that had been dismissed as primitive was about to prove that sometimes the oldest solutions were the most effective ones. The distress calls continued to pour in from across the galaxy, each one carrying the same message: advanced. Technology was failing against an enemy that turned strength into weakness. But humanity's weakness, their reliance on simple, energy-efficient systems, was about to become the galaxy's greatest strength. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike any in recorded history. Delegates who normally maintained perfect composure were visibly shaken, their various forms of body language all conveying the same message: terror. 26. Star systems had fallen silent in the past week, and the galaxy's most advanced military forces seemed powerless to stop whatever was destroying them. High Counselor Vexithera stood at the center of the assembly, her compound eyes reflecting the emergency lighting that had replaced the chamber's usual warm glow. Her voice, normally smooth and confident, carried an edge of desperation that made Ambassador Lisa Carter lean forward in her seat. "The entities have been designated as devourers by our xenobiology teams," Vexithera announced. "They appear to be ancient, possibly predating the first galactic civilizations. Every weapon system in our arsenal has proven ineffective against them." The Korthak delegate's massive form trembled as he spoke. "Our most powerful plasma cannons feed them. Our quantum disruptors make them stronger. They absorb antimatter explosions, like sunshine." Elder Thrakmor of the Vorthan species rose slowly from his position in the ancient section of the assembly. His species was among the oldest in the galaxy, their memories stretching back over 1,000,000 years. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of deep time. "They are not new," he said, each word carefully chosen. "My people's oldest archives speak of such creatures. We called them the Deep Hunger, the devourers of light and life. We thought them legend, warnings told to children about the dangers of the void between galaxies." Captain Ryan Mitchell, sitting beside Lisa, felt a chill run down his spine. "Between galaxies?" Thrakmor's ancient eyes fixed on the human delegation. "They hibernate in the vast emptiness, young human. They sleep until they sense the energy signatures of advanced civilizations. Then they wake and hunt. They are drawn to technology, to the bright flames of progress that shine across the darkness." Dr. Susan Blake activated her tablet, quickly, cross-referencing the Elder's words with human astronomical data. "If they're from intergalactic space, that explains why our deep space monitors never detected them. We've been looking for threats from within our galaxy. Every previous galactic civilization learned this truth too late," Thrakmor continued. "The devourers grow stronger with each technological advancement their prey makes. Energy weapons. Feed them. Quantum manipulation energizes them. Antimatter sustains them. The more advanced a species becomes, the more attractive they are to these ancient predators." The implications crashed over the assembly like a wave. Their greatest strengths had become weaknesses. Every advancement that separated them from primitive species like humanity had painted targets on their worlds. The Nexari delegate, her crystalline form dulled with fear, spoke in broken tones. Our home system's quantum network was completely absorbed. 18 billion beings gone in hours. They drained our planet's energy grid, then moved on. Vexthara's mandibles clicked nervously. The pattern is consistent across all attacks. Colonies with the highest energy outputs are consumed first. The Devourers seem to feed on both technology and life force simultaneously. Admiral Jack Harrison's voice crackled over the communication system from his position with the human fleet. Council members, we've been observing the Devourer movements for the past 72 hours. Our ships have maintained close proximity to their forces without being detected. The chamber fell silent. The idea that humanity's primitive vessels could operate in areas where the galaxy's most advanced fleets had been destroyed seemed impossible. How? Vexthara asked, her composure finally cracking completely. Because they can't see us, Harrison replied. Our technology operates on principles so basic that we don't register as a significant energy source. We're using radio waves, chemical propulsion, and electromagnetic sensors. To creatures that hunt advanced energy signatures, we're practically invisible. Dr. Blake stood to address the assembly. Admiral Harrison is correct. Human technology is based on older scientific principles. We use kinetic energy instead of directed energy, electromagnetic radiation instead of quantum entanglement, and chemical reactions instead of antimatter conversion. Primitive solutions, the Trithan, Delegate whispered, but without mockery. For the first time, the word carried respect. Elder Thrackmore nodded slowly. Yes. The archives speak of survivor species who escaped previous Devourer invasions by abandoning their advanced technology. They hid in the electromagnetic shadows, using simple tools that produced no quantum signatures. Captain Mitchell exchanged glances with Dr. Blake. Their backward military technology suddenly appeared in an entirely different light. Our kinetic weapons, he said slowly, bullets and missiles. They're solid matter moving through space by chemical propulsion. The Devourers have never encountered such weapons, Thrackmore confirmed. They evolved to counter energy-based attacks. Physical projectiles would be as foreign to them as their feeding methods are to us. The chamber buzzed with translated conversations as the galaxy's greatest minds tried to process this revelation. Species that had mocked humanity's reliance on crude technology now realized that those same crude methods might be their salvation. Admiral Harrison's transmission continued. We've identified the largest Devourer concentration near the Beta Centauri system. They're feeding on the remains of the Korthak mining operation there. With the Council's permission, human forces are prepared to engage. The request sent shockwaves through the assembly. The species that couldn't qualify for membership in the Galactic Defense Force was volunteering to fight an enemy that had destroyed everything the galaxy could throw at it. Vexthara looked around the chamber at her fellow delegates. For the first time in galactic history, the advanced species were looking to humanity not with condescension, but with desperate hope. Admiral Harrison, she said, her voice carrying across subspace to the human fleet. What do you need from us? Just stay clear of the engagement zone, Harrison replied, and maybe have medical ships standing by for any survivors we can rescue from the wreckage. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the chamber. The galaxy's most primitive species was about to attempt what its most advanced forces could not achieve. But as reports continued to flood in from across the galaxy, as more systems fell silent and more fleets were consumed, the aliens found themselves clinging to a hope they had never expected, that sometimes the oldest solutions were the most effective ones. Lisa Carter sat back in her chair, watching alien delegates who had spent years dismissing humanity's potential, now hanging on every word from human commanders. The sound of desperation was replacing the sound of mockery, and for the first time since joining the Galactic Council, she heard something she never thought she would: the sound of respect for human ingenuity. The human fleet moved through space like shadows, their chemical thrusters producing no quantum signatures, and their radio communications invisible to beings that hunted by sensing subspace disturbances. Admiral Jack Harrison stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, watching his tactical displays show the largest concentration of Devourers the galaxy had ever recorded. All ships report ready, Admiral, Lieutenant Katie Ross announced from her communication station. 37 human vessels had answered the call, from heavy cruisers to fast attack boats, all carrying weapons that the galaxy had dismissed as primitive toys. Through the Liberty's conventional telescopes, Harrison could see the enemy, for the first time. The Devourers were massive beyond imagination, their forms shifting between solid matter and dark energy as they fed on the wreckage of the Korthak mining station at Beta Centauri. They looked like twisted amalgamations of organic tissue and living darkness, constantly growing and changing shape as they absorbed energy. Commander Lisa Park, tactical officer aboard the heavy cruiser UES Defiance, monitored her screens with growing amazement. "Sir, the energy readings are off the charts. Those things are generating more power than most star systems. That's why energy weapons don't work." Dr. Susan Blake's voice crackled over the fleet communication system from her position aboard the research vessel UES Discovery. "They're not just absorbing the attacks. They're converting the energy and using it to reproduce." Admiral Harrison activated the fleet-wide radio network. "All ships, this is Admiral Harrison. Remember, these creatures have never faced kinetic bombardment. They've spent eons adapting to counter energy-based attacks, but they have no defense against good old-fashioned physics." Lieutenant Commander Steve Adams grinned as he powered up the railguns aboard the heavy cruiser UES Thunder. The magnetic acceleration weapons could launch solid tungsten rods at significant fractions of light speed. By alien standards, they were crude and inefficient, but crude had its advantages. "Gunnery teams report ready across the fleet," Adams announced. "We have a full spread of kinetic penetrators, chemical explosives, and conventional warheads locked, on target." The first salvo began without the spectacular light shows that marked galactic warfare. Instead of energy beams and quantum disruptions, the human fleet unleashed something the Devourers had never experienced: solid matter moving at devastating velocities. The railgun projectiles struck the lead Devourer like hammers hitting glass. The creature's energy-absorbing defenses, perfect against plasma and antimatter, were useless against chunks of dense metal traveling at relativistic speeds. The tungsten rods punched through the entity's shifting form, tearing massive wounds that bled dark energy into space. For the first time in eons, a Devourer screamed. The sound rippled across multiple dimensions, a shriek of pain and confusion that resonated through the hulls of every ship in the system. The ancient predator had never experienced physical damage, and its agony was absolute. "Direct hits on primary target," Commander Park reported from the Defiance. "The creature is taking actual structural damage." Captain Michelle Torres, commanding the missile destroyer UES Ranger, unleashed her ship's primary armament. Hundreds of conventional warheads streaked through space, their chemical explosives seeming primitive compared to antimatter charges, but devastatingly effective against an enemy that had no experience with kinetic warfare. The explosions bloomed, like flowers of fire and destruction, sending shockwaves rippling through the Devourer formation. The creatures reeled as expanding gases and metal fragments tore through their energy-based forms. They tried to absorb the explosive force, but chemical energy was too chaotic and unrefined for their feeding mechanisms. "Secondary targets taking heavy damage," Torres reported. "They don't know how to handle conventional explosives." But the real surprise came when the human ships opened up with their point defense systems. Thousands of conventional firearms, from machine guns to artillery pieces, created a storm of lead and steel that filled space around the Devourers. Each bullet represented technology so primitive that it might as well have been magic to creatures adapted to fighting energy weapons. The sound of human warfare filled the void. Not the silent discharge of energy beams, but the thunderous roar of chemical propulsion and the whine of electromagnetically launched projectiles. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness as every human ship poured kinetic death into the ancient predators. Aboard the assault ship UES Warrior, Marine Colonel Jack Murphy coordinated the smaller weapons. "Keep firing, Marines. These things have never seen a bullet before, and they sure as hell don't like them." The Devourers writhed in confusion and pain as solid projectiles tore through their forms. They had evolved perfect defenses against energy-based attacks, but evolution had never prepared them for chunks of metal moving through space by chemical propulsion. Their feeding tentacles, designed to absorb quantum energy, were shredded by machine gun fire. "Admiral, Dr. Blake's excited voice crackled over the radio. The electromagnetic signatures are changing. The Devourers are actually retreating from our weapons fire. Harrison could hardly believe what he was seeing. The creatures that had consumed entire star systems were backing away from human ships, their forms flickering between dimensions as they tried to escape the kinetic bombardment. All ships maintain fire, he ordered. Don't give them time to adapt. The battle raged for 3 hours, but it was unlike any conflict in galactic history. There were no energy shields to penetrate, no quantum defenses to overcome, just solid projectiles moving through space and explosive chemicals converting to expanding gases. Simple physics applied with devastating effectiveness against an enemy that had never encountered such primitive solutions. Lieutenant Commander Adams watched, his tactical display as the Devourer formation began to collapse. Sir, multiple enemy units are withdrawing toward the galactic rim. They're actually running from us. The largest Devourer, wounded by dozens of railgun strikes and chemical explosions, let out another dimensional scream before phasing back toward deep space. Its companions followed, their energy signatures fading as they fled back toward the void between galaxies. As the last of the ancient predators disappeared into the darkness, the human fleet found itself alone among the wreckage of the mining station. But for the first time since the crisis began, they had driven the enemy away rather than feeding it. Fleet report, Admiral Harrison requested. All ships operational, came the replies from across the task force. Minor damage to 3 vessels, from energy feedback but no casualties. The radio crackled with incoming transmissions from galactic forces that had been maintaining safe distances. The aliens had monitored the entire engagement, and their messages carried tones that human ears had never heard before. Amazement, gratitude, and respect. Human fleet, this is Galactic Command. High Counselor Vexithera's voice carried across subspace. We have been monitoring your engagement. The enemy force is in full retreat from your position. Admiral Harrison smiled as he looked out at the stars where the Devourers had fled. Galactic Command, this is Admiral Harrison. Target neutralized. The sound of human weapons seems to be something they can't handle. As news of the victory spread across galactic communication networks, a new sound began to fill the void. The thunder of human warfare, standing ready to protect 47 civilizations with the most primitive and effective weapons the galaxy had ever seen. 6 months after the Battle of Beta Centauri, the Galactic Council chambers had transformed into something Ambassador Lisa Carter barely recognized. The crystal dome still stretched overhead, and the curved seating areas still held 47 different species, but the atmosphere was completely different. Instead of condescending chatter, she heard respectful discussion. Instead of dismissive laughter, there was genuine attention when humans spoke. She took her place at the center of the assembly, flanked by Captain Ryan Mitchell, who now wore the stars of a brigadier general, and Dr. Susan Blake, whose research proposals were no longer relegated to study committees that never met. Around them, alien delegates leaned forward with interest rather than back with amusement. High Counselor Vexithara rose from her platform, her movements carrying none of the previous superiority. Ambassador Carter, the Galactic Defense Force, has submitted a formal request for expanded cooperation with human military forces. Your kinetic weapon designs have proven effective in 7 additional Devourer encounters. The transformation still amazed Lisa. The same beings who had mocked humanity's primitive weapons now studied human military doctrine with the dedication of scholars. Joint training exercises between human and alien forces had become routine, with species that once dismissed bullets learning to appreciate the devastating simplicity of solid projectiles. The request is approved, Lisa replied, her voice carrying an authority that would have seemed impossible months before. General Mitchell will coordinate the expanded program with your military planners. Mitchell nodded, his promotion reflecting humanity's new status in galactic affairs. High Counselor, we're prepared to establish joint armament facilities in 12 star systems. Human engineers will work alongside your technicians to integrate kinetic weapons with alien targeting and propulsion systems. The results had been spectacular. Alien ships equipped with human railguns could engage Devourers at ranges their energy weapons could never achieve. The ancient predators, still trying to adapt to kinetic warfare, found themselves facing an enemy that combined human innovation with alien technology. Dr. Blake stood to address the assembly. Our joint research teams have made significant progress understanding devourer physiology. By combining human kinetic principles with alien energy manipulation, we've developed weapons that are even more effective than our original designs. The bow. Irony wasn't lost on anyone. The galaxy's most advanced species had spent centuries perfecting energy-based technology, only to discover that their salvation lay in going backward. Human scientists now worked as equals alongside alien researchers, their different approaches creating innovations neither could achieve alone. Commander Lisa Park, now Admiral Park and commanding the joint human-alien patrol fleet, transmitted her latest report from the Rim territories. Council, the combined patrols have successfully repelled 15 devourer incursions over the past month. No colonies lost, minimal casualties. The success rate would have been impossible with purely alien forces. The devourers had learned to avoid areas where human radio communications could be detected, but they still couldn't effectively counter kinetic weapons. The galaxy had gained something it had never possessed before, an effective defense against its oldest enemy. But perhaps the most significant change wasn't military. Lieutenant Katie Ross, now Commander Ross, and head of the new Galactic Communication Network, reported on the transformation of interstellar communications. Council members, we now have 43 species utilizing hybrid communication systems, quantum entanglement for speed, radio transmission for security and redundancy. The galaxy had learned that humanity's primitive radio broadcasts weren't just noise pollution. They were invisible to devourers and immune to the quantum disruption that could sever advanced communication networks. What had once been mocked as electromagnetic clutter was now praised as tactical innovation. Elder Thrackmore, his ancient voice carrying approval, addressed the assembly. The young species has taught us an important lesson. Advancement is not always about moving forward. Sometimes wisdom lies in remembering the tools that brought you to where you are. The chamber responded with respectful attention, a sound that still thrilled Lisa after months of hearing it. The species that had once dismissed humanity as amusing children now treated them as valuable partners whose different perspective had saved the galaxy. Captain Michelle Torres, promoted to Commodore after her performance at Beta Centauri, submitted her patrol report from the Outer Rim. No devourer activity detected in the past 6 weeks. Our kinetic interdiction fields appear to be keeping them at bay. The interdiction fields were another human innovation that had revolutionized galactic defense. Clouds of small kinetic projectiles, launched by mass drivers and maintained by automated systems, created barriers that devourers couldn't cross without taking continuous physical damage. Simple, effective, and impossible to absorb or redirect. High Counselor Vexithara gestured toward the human delegation with genuine respect. Ambassador Carter, the Council wishes to formally recognize humanity's contribution to galactic security. We propose elevation to full Council membership with permanent representation on the Defense Committee. The offer would have seemed impossible a year ago. Humanity had gone from being barely tolerated observers to essential partners in galactic civilization, not by becoming more like everyone else, but by remaining exactly who they were. The offer is appreciated and accepted, Lisa replied. Humanity is honored to serve alongside all member species in protecting our shared civilization. General Mitchell activated his communication system, addressing the human forces spread across 47 star systems. All units maintain patrol, schedules, and continue joint training operations. The galaxy is counting on us. The response crackled back across radio frequencies that now carried the conversations of dozens of species. What had once been considered primitive noise was now the backbone of galactic emergency communications, immune to devourer interference and instantly available to any species with basic radio equipment. Dr. Blake smiled as she reviewed the latest research reports. Council, I'm pleased to announce that our joint xenobiology teams have successfully developed early warning systems based on electromagnetic monitoring. We can detect devourer approach signatures weeks before they reach inhabited systems. The Warning networks relied on human radio telescope technology, upgraded with alien computing power to process vast amounts of electromagnetic data. Another example of how combining different approaches created solutions superior to either alone. As the session concluded, delegates filed out with the relaxed conversation of beings who no longer feared extinction. The sound that filled the chamber was no longer mockery, but the productive discussion of partners working toward common goals. Admiral Park's voice crackled over the interstellar communication network. All patrol units, this is RIM Command. Sector 7 reports successful interdiction of a small devourer probe. No assistance required. The routine nature of the report represented humanity's greatest victory. What had once been galaxy-threatening catastrophes were now handled by routine patrols using weapons that fired bullets and communicated by radio. The devourers still lurked in the void between galaxies, but they no longer hunted unopposed. Lisa Carter walked through the corridors of the council building toward her transport, listening to the sounds of galactic civilization. Alien languages mixed with human voices, quantum communicators chattered alongside radio transmissions, and the distant rumble of ships launching with both antimatter drives and chemical thrusters. The sound of peace in the galaxy now included the thunder of human weapons, standing ready to defend 47 civilizations with the most effective primitive technology anyone had ever developed. It was a sound that spoke of diversity, cooperation, and the wisdom of approaching old problems with new solutions. As her transport lifted away from Nexus Prime, Lisa could hear the faint radio chatter of human patrol ships checking in across the galaxy. The species that had once been dismissed as primitively charming now provided the backbone of galactic defense, their ancient solutions proving more effective than technologies that seemed like magic. The devourers might return in greater numbers someday, but they would face not just the energy weapons they had adapted to counter, but the thunder of human warfare that reminded the universe that sometimes the oldest ways were the best ways, and there was nothing primitive about a solution that worked